The shadow of the Dominion. The void between stars held secrets, but none quite as terrifying as the Krenthak warships. Their massive bioengineered vessels pulsed with an eerie violet light, organic hulls rippling like muscle beneath translucent scales. From the observation deck of Colony Station Delta 7, Administrator Chen watched another world fall to their unstoppable advance. The Krenthak had emerged from the galactic core 3 decades ago, bringing with them technologies that defied conventional understanding. Their ships weren't built, they were grown. Their weapons didn't destroy, they consumed. Each victory added to their biological arsenal as they absorbed the genetic and technological achievements of the species they conquered. Another transmission from the Arcturus sector. Chen's assistant reported, her voice trembling. The Myriad Collective has surrendered. Their entire defense fleet, it's just gone. Chen closed his eyes, remembering the myriad, brilliant crystalline beings who had helped humanity establish its first extrasolar colonies. Now they too would serve the Empire, their crystalline technology twisted into new weapons of war. The Krenthak's method of conquest was methodical, almost artistic in its cruelty. They didn't simply defeat their enemies, they broke them, physically and psychologically. Their bioengineered horrors would infiltrate planetary defense systems, turning a civilization's own achievements against them. They understood fear wasn't just an emotion, it was a weapon. Word of their victories spread faster than their actual advance, causing many worlds to surrender before the first Krenthak ship entered their system. Those who resisted faced something worse than death: transformation. The Krenthak's biotechnology could reshape captured populations into loyal servants, their original forms twisted into nightmarish new configurations. In their arrogance, the Krenthak had largely ignored humanity. Earth and its colonies were seen as primitive, barely worth the effort of conquest. Humans still relied on mechanical ships, projectile weapons, and crude energy systems. The Empire's scouts had dismissed them as biological dead ends, useful only as basic labor stock. But in that dismissal lay humanity's greatest advantage. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in chambers shielded from even the most advanced scanning technologies, Earth's finest minds had been working. They had studied every scrap of data from Krenthak encounters, analyzed debris from their battles, and reached a stunning conclusion. The Empire's greatest strength was also its critical weakness. The Krenthak's biological technology was incredibly advanced, but it followed predictable patterns. Like any living thing, it could be understood, and what could be understood could be defeated. More importantly, their absolute confidence in their superiority had made them careless. They never bothered to hide their communications, believing their bioengineered encryption was unbreakable. They were wrong. Chen turned from the observation window as his secure communicator chimed. The message was brief, but it sent a surge of hope through his tired frame. Project Phoenix is ready. For 3 years, he had helped coordinate the greatest secret in human history. While the Krenthak conquered their way across known space, humanity had been preparing, not with biological weapons or massive fleets, but with something the Empire would never expect: a single ship crewed by the finest warriors Earth could produce. The U.S. Phoenix wasn't just a warship, it was humanity's answer to the Krenthak's biological horror. Its hull contained revolutionary metamaterials that could adapt to enemy attacks. Its weapons combined principles of physics the Empire had never considered. But its greatest weapon was its crew, men and women trained not just to fight, but to think in ways the Krenthak couldn't predict. As Chen composed his response, alerts flashed across the station's screens. The Krenthak were advancing again, their massive fleet moving toward the Carina Nebula. They would expect the same thing they'd seen countless times before: fear, surrender, submission. Instead, they would face something entirely new. Humanity wasn't going to fight the way the Krenthak expected. They weren't going to match biological horror with biological horror. Instead, they would show the galaxy that sometimes the simplest solutions, courage, ingenuity, and the unwillingness to submit, were the most powerful weapons of all. Project Phoenix is authorized. Chen typed, his fingers steadied despite the weight of the moment. Launch when ready. Show them what humanity can do. C sent the message. He allowed himself a small smile. The Krenthak had conquered through fear, but they were about to learn what happened when they encountered someone who wasn't afraid. One ship against an empire. It seemed impossible, but then, humanity had always excelled at achieving the impossible. The war for the galaxy's soul was about to begin. Operation Starfall. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the Phoenix's command center, her reflection ghosting across holographic displays that filled the circular room. The ship hummed with a sound unlike any other vessel in human history. Not the deep throb of conventional engines, but a crystalline resonance that seemed to dance at the edge of hearing. Final systems check complete, Captain. Commander David Okafor reported, his fingers dancing across adaptive interface panels. The quantum mesh is stable, and all subsystems are responding perfectly. The Phoenix was humanity's masterpiece, but describing it as a ship felt inadequate. Traditional hulls were rigid, unchanging things. The Phoenix's surface was composed of billions of programmable nanites, allowing it to alter its structure in real time. When dormant, it resembled a sleek arrowhead of midnight blue. In combat, it could transform into whatever configuration the situation demanded. "Show me the crew status," Sarah ordered, and a holographic display shifted. 200 of humanity's finest, each chosen not just for their skills, but for their ability to think beyond conventional boundaries. They had spent months training in simulations based on recovered Krenthak combat data, learning to fight an enemy that considered itself invincible. Dr. Maya Patel, the ship's chief scientist, stepped forward with her latest report. "The biomimetic countermeasures are ready, Captain. The Krenthak won't be able to interface with our systems like they do with other vessels. We're not just resistant, we're toxic to their biotech." That was the Phoenix's true genius. Instead of trying to match the Krenthak's biological technology, they had developed systems that could disrupt it. The ship's outer layer could generate frequencies that interfered with the enemy's neural networks, turning their greatest strength into a vulnerability. "Lieutenant Santos, bring up the tactical display," Sarah commanded. A three-dimensional map materialized, showing the Krenthak's advance through the Carina Nebula. Their massive bioships moved in patterns that seemed random but followed deep biological imperatives. Like predators, they targeted the weak, isolated their prey, and struck with overwhelming force. "They're approaching the Vega colonies," Santos reported, her voice tight with controlled anger. Her family had fled the Arcturus sector when the Krenthak arrived. Standard conquest pattern. They'll try to isolate each settlement before beginning their conversion protocols. Sarah studied the display, seeing not just the enemy's movements, but the opportunities they created. The Krenthak's biological ships were incredibly powerful, but they were also predictable. They responded to threats the way living organisms did, with aggressive dominance displays and direct confrontation. "They expect everything to either submit or fight conventionally," Sarah said, addressing her bridge crew. "We're going to show them something new. Lieutenant Kumar, plot an intercept course. Commander Okafor, begin power-up sequence for the quantum drives." The Phoenix's engines were based on principles that the Krenthak had never encountered. Instead of pushing against space, they created localized quantum fields that allowed the ship to essentially fall through carefully calculated discontinuities. It wasn't faster than light travel. It was cheating space itself. As the crew prepared for their first real combat deployment, Sarah moved through the ship, speaking with her people. They were an incredible mix: veterans of past conflicts, brilliant scientists, and young officers chosen for their unconventional problem-solving abilities. Each had their own reason for being here, their own story of loss or defiance against the Krenthak's advance. In the ship's engineering heart, Chief Engineer Marcus Wong was fine-tuning the quantum mesh controls. The entire vessel could reconfigure itself in microseconds, transforming from a solid warship to a dispersed cloud of nanites and back again. It was technology that bordered on magic, but it was pure human ingenuity, born from thousands of hours of research and testing. All systems are green, Marcus reported, his usual grin replaced by intense concentration. The mesh is responding perfectly to all simulation protocols. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Sarah returned to the bridge as final launch preparations began. Through the main viewport, she could see Mars' surface falling away as they ascended. The Phoenix's outer layer shifted colors, matching the backdrop of space so perfectly that they practically vanished from sight. "Send the final transmission to command," she ordered. "Operation Starfall is commencing." As they accelerated away from Earth's solar system, Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Everything humanity had learned about warfare, about technology, about survival, it was all distilled into this single ship and its mission. The Krenthak had conquered through fear and biological superiority. They had never faced an enemy that could think like them but fight completely differently. They had never encountered a species that turned its perceived weakness, its reliance on primitive mechanical technology, into its greatest strength. "Quantum drive spooling up," Kumar announced. "Course laid in for the Vega sector." Sarah Chen took her command chair, feeling the subtle vibration as the Phoenix prepared to make its first jump. "Let's go hunting," she said quietly. "It's time to show the galaxy that humanity isn't just another species waiting to be conquered. We're the ones they should have feared all along." The stars blurred as the quantum drive engaged, carrying humanity's greatest achievement toward its date with destiny. The Phoenix vanished into the void, leaving behind a solar system that held its breath, waiting to see if a single ship could change the course of galactic history. The battle at Proxima's edge. The Vega colony of New Aurora hung in space like a jewel, its atmospheric shields barely visible against the star-studded backdrop. On the Phoenix's bridge, tactical displays showed 3 massive Krenthak bioships approaching the colony, their violet hulls pulsing with predatory intent. "Life signs on the bioships are off the charts," Lieutenant Santos reported, her hand steady despite the tension. "They're carrying conversion pods. They're not here just to conquer. They're planning to transform the entire population." Captain Chen's jaw tightened. The Krenthak's conversion process was perhaps their most horrific weapon, turning free beings into biological puppets that served the Empire. "Not today," she said quietly. "Combat stations. Initialize stealth protocols." The Phoenix's nanite hull shifted, creating a surface that absorbed both light and sensor signals. To conventional scans, they might as well have been a piece of empty space. The quantum drive had allowed them to arrive hours ahead of the Krenthak fleet, giving them time to prepare their trap. "Dr. Patel, status of the biomimetic countermeasures." "Ready, Captain," Maya responded from her science station. "The disruptor frequencies are calibrated to their neural patterns. The moment they try to interface with us, they'll get a nasty surprise." The lead Krenthak vessel was massive, easily 20 times the size of the Phoenix. Its biological weapons were capable of reducing planets to ash, yet it moved with an almost graceful precision. The Empire's biotech wasn't just powerful, it was beautiful in its own terrible way. "They're beginning their standard attack pattern," Commander Okafor observed, "spreading out to surround the colony. Just like we predicted." Sarah nodded. The Krenthak's tactics were based on instinct as much as strategy. Like apex predators, they sought to isolate their prey before striking. It had worked countless times before, but it also made them predictable. "Quantum mesh at full power," Chief Wong reported from engineering. "Ready for combat configuration on your mark." Sarah took a deep breath. Everything they'd planned, everything they trained for, came down to this moment. "Begin attack pattern Omega. Let's introduce ourselves." The Phoenix seemed to dissolve, its nanite hull separating into 3 distinct clouds that matched the exact sensor profile of stellar debris. As the Krenthak ships moved into position, these debris clouds drifted into their blind spots. The enemy's first warning came when the Phoenix reconstituted itself less than a kilometer from the lead bioship's neural cluster. Before the Krenthak could react, the human vessel fired its primary weapon. Not a conventional energy beam or projectile, but a focused burst of quantum-entangled particles. The effect was devastating. The bioship's neural pathways, expecting to encounter standard weapons, were overwhelmed by signals that existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. It was like giving a living brain a paradox it couldn't resolve. Direct hit, Santos called out. Their neural network is showing massive disruption. They're losing coherence. The Krenthak ship's surface rippled in agony, its biological weapons turning inward as its control systems failed. But Sarah knew they couldn't celebrate yet. The other two vessels were already responding, their weapons charging as they turned to face this unexpected threat. Initiating Phase 2, Sarah ordered. Deploy the quantum mines. As the Phoenix accelerated away from the wounded flagship, it left behind dozens of tiny devices that had been masquerading as part of its hull. These quantum mines didn't explode. Instead, they created microscopic areas where the laws of physics briefly operated differently. To the Krenthak's biological technology, it was like suddenly finding portions of their ships existing in incompatible realities. The second bioship fired, launching a stream of plasma that should have vaporized any conventional vessel. Instead, the Phoenix's hull fractured into thousands of smaller components, letting the plasma pass harmlessly through the gaps before reconstituting on the other side. Return fire, Sarah commanded. All batteries, focused disruptor pattern. The Phoenix's weapons were designed specifically to target the biological components of Krenthak ships. Each hit cascaded through their neural networks, creating feedback loops that turned their own impressive biology against them. It wasn't just combat. It was applied xenobiology, turning their greatest strength into a critical weakness. The colony's picking up our signal, Kumar reported excitedly. They're broadcasting our attack across all frequencies. The whole sector's watching. That was part of the plan, too. For too long, the galaxy had seen the Krenthak as invincible. Showing that they could be hurt, could be beaten, was as important as the tactical victory itself. The third bioship tried to retreat, attempting to call for reinforcements. But the Phoenix's quantum drive gave it impossible maneuverability, letting it cut off the enemy's escape route. Caught between the human vessel's attacks and their own failing biological systems, the mighty Krenthak ships began to die. Enemy flagship is going critical, Santos announced. Their neural network is completely collapsed. The other two ships are trying to disconnect from their group consciousness. They're experiencing actual panic. The battle ended not with a massive explosion, but with the sight of three mighty bioships drifting powerless in space, their once threatening forms now dark and lifeless. The Phoenix hung between them and the colony, its hull reshaping itself back into its standard configuration. Damage report, Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Their strategy had worked perfectly. Minor power fluctuations in the quantum mesh, already restored, Marcus reported. We're at 97% combat effectiveness. Captain, we did it. We actually did it. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she looked at the tactical display. The Krenthak ships were already beginning to decompose, their biological components breaking down without the central neural network to sustain them. But more importantly, communication buoys across the sector were lighting up as the news spread. The invincible Krenthak had been defeated, not by a massive fleet or superior numbers, but by a single human ship that turned their own nature against them. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's supposed weakness, their reliance on primitive mechanical technology, was actually their greatest advantage. Send word to command, Sarah ordered. First engagement successful. The Phoenix is operational and ready to continue its mission. She paused, looking at her crew's proud faces. And let them know, this is just the beginning. Breaking the chain. News of the Phoenix's victory spread through the galaxy like wildfire, transmitted through both official channels and the hidden networks of resistance that had survived beneath Krenthak rule. Each retelling grew more detailed as suppressed species added their own analysis of how a single human ship had accomplished the impossible. The Phoenix was docked at New Aurora's orbital station, its adaptive hull reflecting the local star's light in shifting patterns. Inside the station's secure conference chamber, Captain Chen faced a gathering unlike any in human history. Representatives from a dozen conquered species had risked everything to meet with her. Your ship's attack strategy. The myriad ambassadors' crystalline form chimed with barely contained excitement. It violated every principle of Krenthak combat doctrine. They didn't just lose, they were unable to comprehend how they lost. A hologram of the battle played above the conference table, showing how the Phoenix had turned its supposedly primitive technology into an overwhelming advantage. The Krenthak's biological ships, for all their power, couldn't adapt to quantum state attacks or rapidly reconfigure themselves like the nanite hull. We've spent decades trying to match their biological technology, rumbled the Vextar representative, his armored carapace bearing the scars of failed rebellions. None of us considered that the solution was to go in the opposite direction. Sarah shared a knowing look with Dr. Patel, who was presenting the technical analysis. The Krenthak's greatest weakness is their absolute certainty in their superiority, Maya explained. They've evolved their biotech to counter every natural threat they've encountered, but they've never faced technology that operates outside their understanding of natural law. The station's sensors suddenly pulsed an alert. A Krenthak patrol fleet had emerged from quantum space at the edge of the system. 6 bioships, larger than the ones they'd defeated before. The Empire was responding to the loss of their ships with overwhelming force, just as expected. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, Commander Okafor reported, demanding our immediate surrender and threatening to transform the entire population if we resist. But something was different this time. On the tactical display, Sarah could see smaller ships emerging from hidden docks around New Aurora. The colony's defense force, which had been preparing to surrender like so many others, was instead moving to combat positions. The Phoenix will not fight alone, the colony's governor announced over the command channel. We've studied your battle tactics, Captain Chen. We may not have your advanced technology, but we know how to adapt. Sarah watched in amazement as civilian ships joined the defensive screen. Mining vessels had been fitted with makeshift versions of the Phoenix's quantum disruptors. Cargo haulers carried improvised versions of their quantum mines. They weren't as sophisticated as the Phoenix's weapons, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to show that humanity would no longer submit. All ships, coordinate with the Phoenix, Sarah commanded, feeling the surge of pride as her crew moved to battle stations. Remember what we learned. They're not invincible. They're just another enemy that can be understood and defeated. The battle that followed would be remembered across the galaxy as the moment everything changed. The Krenthak ships attacked with their usual overwhelming force, expecting their biological weapons to tear through primitive human defenses. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that refused to fight according to their rules. Colonial ships darted between the massive bioships. Their improvised weapons might not have been as effective as the Phoenix's, but they proved that even simple technology could hurt the mighty Krenthak. The Phoenix itself seemed to be everywhere at once, its quantum drive letting it strike from impossible angles, while its nanite hull adapted to every counterattack. Their neural network is destabilizing, Santos reported with fierce satisfaction. They can't coordinate their attacks. They've never had to fight individually before. One by one, the Krenthak ships fell silent, their biological systems overwhelmed by weapons they couldn't adapt to counter. The few that tried to retreat found their quantum tunnels disrupted by fields of human quantum mines, forcing them to fight to the bitter end. As the last enemy ship drifted powerless in space, cheers erupted across every channel. But Sarah knew this victory meant more than just saving one colony. The representatives watching from the station had seen something they'd thought impossible, a way to fight back that didn't require matching the Krenthak's biological superiority. We've received 67 requests for technical data on our defensive modifications, the colony's governor announced proudly. Every human settlement in 3 sectors is mobilizing to adapt their ships. But more importantly, we're getting calls from other species. They want to join us. The Phoenix's victory hadn't just proven that the Krenthak could be beaten. It had shown that resistance wasn't futile, that being primitive could be an advantage. Across the galaxy, subjugated species began looking at their own technology in new ways, seeing possibilities where before they'd only seen inadequacy. The Empire will respond with everything they have, the Vextar representative warned, but his tone carried more excitement than fear. They cannot allow this challenge to their supremacy to stand. Sarah looked at the tactical display, where dozens of colonial ships were already beginning to implement the Phoenix's innovations. Let them come, she said quietly, because when they do, they won't be facing a single human ship anymore. They'll be facing every species that's tired of living under their shadow. The war for the galaxy's freedom was no longer about matching the Krenthak's biological horror. It was about something they'd never expected: the power of diverse species working together, each contributing their own unique approach to defeating what had seemed undefeatable. The chain of fear that had bound the galaxy was breaking, one victory at a time. Dawn of liberation. The Krenthak Apex command ship filled the Phoenix's view screen, a living mountain of bioengineered horror that dwarfed even their largest normal vessels. Its surface writhed with weapon pods and neural clusters, the accumulated biological knowledge of 1,000 conquered species turned into engines of war. They call it the Dominion's heart, Dr. Puddle reported, her voice tight with controlled tension. It's not just their flagship. It's the central node of their entire neural network. Every Krenthak ship in the galaxy is connected to it. 3 months had passed since the Battle of New Aurora. In that time, the galaxy had changed. Inspired by the Phoenix's victories, resistance movements had sprung up across Krenthak space. Human technology had been adapted by dozens of species, each adding their own innovations to the basic principles the Phoenix had proven. Allied fleet is in position, Commander Okafor announced. The tactical display showed hundreds of ships, not just human vessels, but craft from every species that had joined their rebellion. The myriads crystalline ships glittered alongside Vextar war cruisers, each modified with quantum disruptors and adaptive armor. The Krenthak never imagined this, Sarah said quietly, watching their allies move into formation. They thought conquering us would just add another species to their collection. Instead, they gave us something they never had, a reason to work together. The enemy flagship pulsed with violent light, its biological weapons charging. The Krenthak had finally realized the true threat humanity posed, not just to their military power, but to the very idea that biological superiority meant the right to rule. They're broadcasting, Santos reported. Audio only. A voice filled the bridge, not spoken but transmitted directly through neural frequencies. Your resistance is an evolutionary dead end, the Krenthak Apex commander declared. Your primitive technology cannot match the power of natural selection perfected. Surrender now, and your species may yet serve a purpose in our grand design. Sarah stood from her command chair, her voice steady as she responded. You still don't understand. We're not here to match your evolution. We're here to show you that evolution isn't everything. Unity, creativity, the willingness to think beyond biological imperatives. That's what you should have feared. The Phoenix's quantum mesh hummed as it prepared for battle. Around them, the Allied fleet began implementing the strategy they'd spent weeks perfecting. Each species had contributed their unique insights, creating a battle plan that no single race could have devised alone. All ships, commence Operation Daybreak, Sarah commanded. Show them what happens when the galaxy stands together. The battle erupted across space like a new star being born. The Dominion's heart launched waves of biological weapons, each designed to counter specific species technologies. But the Allied fleet didn't fight as separate species. They fought as one force, covering each other's weaknesses, amplifying each other's strengths. The Phoenix led the charge, its nanite hull flowing like liquid metal as it dove through gaps in the enemy's defenses. Myriad ships followed in its wake, their crystalline structures refracting the Phoenix's quantum attacks to hit multiple targets. Vextar cruisers provided coverage with weapons that combined their natural plasma generation with human quantum mechanics. Their neural network is trying to adapt, Maya reported excitedly, but it can't process all the different attack patterns. Every time it develops a counter to one approach, we switch to another. The Dominion's heart fought back with terrifying power, its biological weapons evolving mid-battle to create new horrors. But that was what they'd counted on. Each adaptation drained resources from its neural network, forcing it to focus on immediate threats rather than maintaining its galaxy-wide control. Quantum mesh at maximum charge. Chief Wang's voice came through from engineering. Ready for the final phase. Sarah took a deep breath. Everything they'd learned, every battle they'd fought, had led to this moment. All allies, fall back to minimum safe distance. Phoenix crew, initiate Protocol Omega. The ship's entire hull began to glow as its quantum drive powered up beyond safety limits. They weren't going to destroy the Dominion's heart. They were going to do something far worse. Quantum field extending, Maya announced, beginning upload of the Freedom Protocol. The Phoenix's nanites swarmed across the massive bioship's hull, carrying a virus unlike any the Krenthak had faced. Not a biological weapon, but a quantum algorithm designed to propagate through their neural network. It didn't destroy, it liberated. The Dominion's heart's weapons fell silent as the virus spread through its systems, breaking the chains of control that bound its biological components. Across the galaxy, Krenthak ships suddenly found themselves cut off from the central consciousness that had controlled them for generations. It's working, Santos exclaimed. The neural network is dissolving. They're ships. They're becoming individuals again. The mighty flagship's surface stopped its violent writhing, settling into a more natural rhythm. When the Apex commander's voice came again, it was different. Confused, almost afraid. What have you done to us? We've set you free. Sarah responded. Your biological technology was never meant to enslave. You forgot that evolution isn't just about dominance. It's about adaptation, cooperation, finding new ways to survive together. The battle ended not with the destruction of the Krenthak, but with their awakening. As the Phoenix's virus spread through their network, centuries of imposed unity fell away. Each ship, each individual, gained the ability to think for themselves again. We're receiving surrenders from Krenthak forces across 40 sectors, Okafor reported, his voice filled with wonder. They're asking for help understanding what they've become. Sarah looked out at the Dominion's heart, no longer a symbol of terror, but a reminder that even the mightiest could change. Send word to the Alliance, she ordered. The war is over. Now the real work begins. The Phoenix had achieved something greater than military victory. It had shown the galaxy that true strength came not from biological superiority or technological advancement, but from the willingness to unite despite differences. Humanity's greatest contribution hadn't been their weapons or their strategies. It had been their ability to bring together disparate species in the cause of freedom. As the Allied fleet moved to secure the former flagship, Sarah Chen thought about how far they'd come. The Krenthak had sought to rule through fear and biological dominance. Instead, they had united the galaxy against them and learned a lesson that would reshape their civilization. In the end, cooperation would always be stronger than conquest. The dawn of a new era had begun, and this time, every species would face it together.